This is a big topic in economics. Now, remember in the very first class or second class, chapter 1 or chapter 3, we use this expression like smart for one, dumb for all, something like that. So this is talking about this situation in which, remember, perfect competition, you got all this wonderful assumption, benchmark. You say, oh, many buyers and sellers, oh, they're all well informed. Oh, all the resources are mobile. Now, this is not going to be true for externality, because the last chapter we studied game theory, we say that oligopoly, they get into this interdependent pricing and strategies, right? We talk about that. So there are two types of externality. So when you hear the word externality, we're talking about, once again, cost and benefit, like your first chapter, but now we call this external cost, we call that external benefit. Okay, when you use the term external cost, you're talking about negative externality. Okay, and write this down. This is a good one to take with. And when we talk about external benefit, we talk about positive externality. And I'll give example coming up. They're not the same, just cost and benefit per se. And this is a topic that a lot of students, for your final paper, you want to find this topic. And because it's so many applications everywhere that you see. Okay? So again, what is externality? There are two types. One is cost, the other one is benefit. So let's talk about external cost first. So this is a cost that falls on people other than those who pursue the activity. Wow. We call it negative externality. A good example would be like pollution, right? It's these upstream manufacturers, chemical plant or something. And then downstream the river, there are fishermen fishing. So if you're dumping a lot of toxin upstream from your factory into the river, guess who get affected? The fisherman downstream. Is he going to catch a lot of fish? No. So that's what we call negative externality or external cost. Because, that's the kind of cost that it falls on people other than those who pursue the activity. People don't think about it. If you go to a park, you want to enjoy, right? Jogging or what have you, or you want to have some sort of peace, serenity, and then suddenly you hear this loud rock music. Now that is the externality, negative. There's some student who, over the years, argue with me and say that could be positive too. Yeah, if you think of it, you like that kind of music, that could be positive because you're not paying for it, but you get to listen. Okay. But for the most part, people think of that kind of noise as external. You are bothering me. Turn down the volume. Have you had roommates in your dormitory room that talk on the cell phone all the time? You say, please take it to the other room. That is negative externality. So why do you think the dormitories start charging people? Well, impose a fine and said, if you smoke in the dormitory room, you have to pay a fine, something like that. So again, smoking is externality. How many of you heard about secondhand smoking? Almost everybody. Okay. So yeah, they don't want you to smoke around them, because they get this secondhand smoking effects on them. But there's nothing they could do. So that's what it means. There's a cost imposed on other people involuntarily, if you like. Let's look at the external benefit. A benefit received by people other than those who pursue the activity. And we call that positive externality. Now remember, this is a little bit beyond just your normal cost and normal benefit. How many of you like Christmas lights? So during Christmas season, you drive around the neighborhood, you say, come on, kids, get into the car. We're going to explore the beautiful neighborhoods with lights and all that. Do you pay for that? No. It's free. You drive around enjoying the lights. That's called positive externality. Those people who put out the light, I don't think they charge you. I don't think they put the tent around their light and say, well, you got to pay to walk into the tent to enjoy the light. Well, come on, you defeat the purpose, right? So everybody is free to walk around and or drive around and enjoy the light, but you're not paying for it. The host pays for it. So that's positive external. This is good. This is a smiling face. This is a sad face. Now let's talk about that a little bit. External benefit. Sometimes you drive around a nice neighborhood with beautiful landscape. That once again is positive externality. Versus if you drive around lots of places in Robeson County, what do you say? You see trash everywhere. That's not very, that's not a very beautiful sight. And you see dead animals on the road, should be picked up, but no, they have not. That's, again, negative externality there. Okay, so let's talk about, I think you got some idea right now. A classic example of positive and negative externality, kind of like together, you apply together is you may have heard about this story. This is a classic economic example. You have a bee farm next to the orchard. What kind of orchard? Apple. So guess what? Those people, they produce juicy baked apples. Good harvest, because the bees from next door fly over, they pollinate the trees, the flowers, the trees, so they get, they get to enjoy the bees from next door, but not paying for it. So that's a classic case of what we call positive externality or external benefit. And then we could turn the situation around. We say, never mind about this apple orchard now, so let's say that this is a old folks home. You know how these people are, they like to come out to the yard and enjoy the sunshine, get a little bit of fresh air instead of staying in the room. In the old folks home, the bees might be flying around, they might be stung by the bees. So there it is, that's your negative externality. They didn't ask for it, but it's unfortunately next door. You see the difference between the two cases here? So that's the application of positive and negative externality. Another good example for positive externality is the reason you're here now, to get education. Education is considered a positive externality. Why is that? Because when you're educated, you don't just say, hey, it's mine. I'm just gonna keep it to myself. No. You're gonna go out and affect other people, your families, your loved one and your neighbors, and you're gonna vote intelligently, and you're gonna have a job, you're gonna affect people around you. So that's a good thing. It's a positive externality. It's an investment. So therefore, the government subsidizes education. You see why now? Why education all over the world is being subsidized? Likewise, healthcare. What do you think? During the flu season, they keep saying, well, yeah, go get your flu shot. How many of you do that? Well, some of you believe in it, some of you don't. So now, let's just say that if you're healthy during the flu season, you're not coming in and infecting anybody, you're not coughing and, so you're healthy. So you come to work or you come to school and you're not being absent from school. And that's a good thing. That's a positive externality. So government wants to encourage that more. And that's why a lot of these flu shots, they are free. Why? Because it has this positive externality. If you're not infecting people who sit right next to you, everybody's healthy. Hey, if you're healthy, everybody's healthy. You're not affecting people next to you. So that, once again, is what we call positive externality. Okay, so let's look at the implication of invisible hand, which is the perfect competition. Apply under condition of perfect competition. And remember, when we talk about perfect competition earlier, we say there's no externality. That was one of the assumptions. And now remember, we're going back now and relax all the assumptions. So one of the assumptions we relax is we say now there is now, in this chapter we deal with, we're gonna deal with externality. Okay, when you have externality, the socially efficient outcome of free market may not happen. We'll look at some graph which will demonstrate that very clearly. So externality is not good for society. Whether it's positive or negative, we'll look at it why, okay? And you might think, well, the negative one is not good, the positive one is good. Well, we'll look at it why. Because externality reduces economic efficiency. If it reduces economic efficiency, help me out here. What does it mean? Let's see if you could put it in the language of microeconomics. If you could reduce economic efficiency means it's not efficient, correct? Like in the case of monopoly. So if it is not efficient, you would have something inherent in the market, which is what we call the bad triangle. Tell me what's the term we use in economics. What is that bad triangle I'm talking about?
Dead weight loss.
The dead weight loss. Thank you very much. Yes. So this is what it means. Every time you have externality, you have dead weight loss. So we'll look at the graph very soon. And when you have efficient solution, and sometimes, so because you have externality, we call that market failure. Sometimes in economics, you hear terms like that, market failure. It means the market fails. So then the government has to step in and do something. So what are the things they do? They have to step in to tax or to fine in the cases where you have fine, F-I-N-E, to impose penalty. In the case where you have negative externality. So like for example, in the case of dormitory, people smoking. How do you stop people from smoking? You impose a fine, for example. How do you stop people from speeding on I-95? Come on, everybody gets it.
Giving out speeding tickets.
You get a speeding ticket. That's how you curb the behavior, because then you say, well, if you are driving recklessly 100 miles per hour, well, that's pretty big. Okay, 85 is better enough. 80 is better enough, okay. So let's go with 80, yeah. The lower end. I keep thinking about kilometer per hour because I drive in, maybe 10 other countries before. So, okay, so if we say speeding ticket, right, because everybody could relate, So in order to cut down some, and that's a negative externality. Because, a lot of time you think like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna do this. Like one time I was driving my son, he was just learning how to drive. So on I-95, and some of you experience it, he's trying to get out, okay, to enter the I-95. And of course, there's trucks coming, and I said, well, you can't go out, you have to watch, you have to do it slowly or pass or slow down because, and you can't say too much because that's at the judgment of the driver. If you say too much, you know what happened. And so he entered, and I said, well, you don't just enter. I say, and he said, well, I could do it, it's my right, I say, you don't say that because you think about other people. And that's what it is, because if you wreck, it's not just you, it's other people around you too. So the same thing, when people said, I could beat the traffic light, come and do it, come on, faster, let's beat the traffic light. And if it happen, it's not just you, the other people too get affected, So therefore, it is a negative externality. So remember, this externality has got to do with not just yourself, but other people that you're affected. That the cost and benefit are not being taken into account. Okay, so that's what it means. So if there is this so-called market failure, then government intervention have to take place. And we study government intervention, at least 4 cases. So tell me, let's do a quick review. So because I'd rather you understand the material rather than just take it. What are some of the examples we talk about market intervention since day one? Now 4 of them, I wrote down for you 2 times in this class. See if you remember. I'll give you a hint for the first one. First one is price control, right? Price ceiling, price floor, very good. Remember, we studied in chapter 6 that every time you have price ceiling or price floor, you have dead weight loss, right? And what are two other cases? We talk about taxation and subsidies. Remember that chapter we talked about subsidies of bread from in other countries, and so every time you have subsidies and taxation, there is some sort of inefficiency. And in this case, definitely. Because this chapter is dealing with tax and subsidy, believe it or not. Okay, so individual consider only their own cost and benefit would tend to engage too much in activity that generate negative externality. So level of which would be greater than socially. Okay, let's do a graph on that. So let's do the graph with me, so you always remember how to do it. Because by looking at the graph that I show you on the PowerPoint slide, or look at your book, you're not going to learn it. But if you draw it now, the memory is better. So that's why you need to come to class. You're not taking online classes. So this is your graph. So we're going to start out with PMB, stands for private marginal benefit. We're going to start with PMC. That's your private marginal cost. So there are two markets now. One is the private market. Okay, the other one is socially efficient market. So we're dealing with the private market first. This is still the same, P and Q. Nothing has changed. Okay, so I'm going to show you the graph here, but this is easier if you draw it with me. Now this is no other than your typical demand curve here. Not a surprise. This is none other than your typical supply curve, except we're dealing with the private market. Okay, so we say in equilibrium, you will have a price, you have a quantity. And let's just say that quantity is 12,000. We're talking about, in this case, that 12,000 tons of pollution, or pollutants, that's being dumped into the river, for example. And the price is 1,300. Okay, let's call this point A. So make it easy. The book doesn't label it, but if you label your diagram, it's a lot easier to explain, you know. And then I want you to remember that this is a case of external cost. Okay, or your so-called negative externality. And remember that this is a case where you have the set phase. Because what happened is the fisherman downstream is not happy, you know, and said, oh, come on, you know, you dump in all these pollutants, it's affecting my catch in the downstream. Instead of catching 100 fish a day, I'm only getting 25 fish a day. Because what happened to the rest? They died as a result of pollution. So then the next thing happened is, I'm going to use a different color. You could if you want. Let's use a red one, maybe, if it works. So I'm going to add the cost. So remember that if it is cost, you only touch the cost curve, which is the upward sloping one, not the downward sloping. The downward sloping one is at the end. It's a marginal benefit. It's a good side of the consumer side. This is the supply or producer side. So we're going to call this SMC. What SMC stands for? Write it down. Social marginal cost. And what social marginal cost means is your PMC, your private marginal cost, plus an external cost. Okay, how do you measure that external cost? This one I'm going to give the English word for it. How do you measure that external cost? This is measured by, see the next graph there? This straight line, the vertical distance between your PMC, private marginal cost, and your social marginal cost. So this vertical distance here is known as your XC, or your external cost. And you look at it, you say, and this triangle right here, well, before we talk about triangle, let's call this point B, okay? So the second point that you see, the second equilibrium point that you see is the socially efficient market. In other words, if you were to take into consideration the whole society, then your equilibrium should be higher up here. And watch what happens. If it is higher up here, right, this quantity comes down, and this is only about 8,000. So you see, at the socially optimal level, you are supposed to produce a lot less pollutants. So we have another term for this, and please write this down because this is on your test. Okay, we call this overproduction. You're producing too much at point A at the private market. You're dumping too much pollutants into the river. So then you should cut down. If you take into account the whole society, to cut down means, well, one way to find out is you raise that social marginal, you draw another line and say this is your social marginal cost. And this line intersect with the private marginal, your original demand curve of private marginal benefit. We call it point B. So at equilibrium, at a socially optimal level, this is called QSOC. This is called QPVT. Means at the private equilibrium or private quantity. And this one means at the socially optimal quantity. So everybody got it? QPVT and QSOC. So because at the private level, you produce too much. So therefore, we have the term overproduction. So you have to cut down. Now, this is a great application of economic model to help the government. Because if you look at it, right, from this graph, you can see that vertical distance here, XC, or external cost, is the one that will help you to get to that point, B. To achieve that. So this XC is known as external cost. Example of XC is right here. Your tax and fine and penalty. So in other words, in order to correct negative externality in any society, the way to do it is for the government to step in by imposing a speeding ticket, imposing a fine, imposing a tax, what else? So that it will cut down. So people will not do too much speeding, for example, dump too much pollutants into the river, they will cut down. So the tax, this vertical distance represents the tax. And then the other thing as well, but I want to write down the main one is a tax. So in other words, you use tax to eliminate negative externality. How beautiful it is. So this application is everywhere, yeah. So, because if you don't, people don't have incentive. They say, oh yeah, we just dump the pollutants into the river, who cares? You would care if the government, EPA come by and say, by the way, we have to charge you 10,000 or 100,000 because you violate the EPA law or something. Okay, so the main thing I want to say is this, that triangle right there is your dead weight loss, okay? So as you can see, it's a dead weight loss caused by the pollution. And so as you can see, in the case of negative externality, and you shall see too, in the case of positive externality, you always produce dead weight loss, which is inefficient. Okay, let's look at the other side of the problem. This is the benefit side, so I'm going to draw another graph on the right. Okay, so do it with me. So on this side, we're going to do positive externality. And this is the case of external benefit. The good thing. Another good thing, I talked about it earlier. Example is education, healthcare, food shops, Christmas lights, what have you. But I'm just going to write down just a few names. So once again, you do your L. Everybody could close your eyes and do L. And then you open your eyes and do an X. Right? Go ahead and label it. PMB or your demand and supply curve. PMC, so point A. And this will be your QPVT, your quantity at the private level. And then we're going to say this is your price and this is your quantity here. So since we're dealing with the external benefit now, okay, so you will want to impose a new line. What line do you think it would be?
Marginal cost.
Not the cost side anymore. You're dealing with the benefit side.
I mean, the PMC.
No, we're not touching the PMC anymore because that's the cost side. So over here, but it's good that you asked that because that's important to point out. Because if you make a mistake there, that's good. At least you think, instead of not thinking at all. So now, in this case, you want to raise the benefit curve, which is a demand curve, okay? So you raise it up to social marginal benefit, which is equal to your PMB plus XB. Your XB is equal to your external benefit. An example of external benefit is subsidy. You heard about government subsidies subsidizing healthcare, like Medicare, Medicaid. You heard about government subsidizing education? Yeah, subsidizing flu shot and so on. So there it is. I'm going to show you the other one. So this is what it looks like. So I do it slowly for you so you remember that for positive externality, you are raising the benefit side of the curve. But over here, the cost side, you're raising the cost side of the curve. The other ones stay intact. Marginal cost stay intact. So this is a point B here, and then we draw a line down. You could do it either way. You could do it this side or the other side. Since the textbook do it the other side, I'll do it the other side. I'm talking about, trying to label your so-called external benefit. So it'll be this distance here. Okay, the vertical distance between these two lines here. So this is your so-called dead weight loss caused by positive externality, and this distance here between here and here is your XB. Okay, so everybody got it? So it is, see this distance here is XB. So it's the same, it's this distance here. So, again, at point B, let's watch what happened. You will have a number here. Let's just say this is 100. And this might be about 300. So this might be the case of flu shot. If there's no subsidy, only 100 people will go in to get their flu shot. They have to pay. And if government subsidize it, make it free, well, maybe not just 300, maybe 500 people will come. Okay, so this is your QSOC. So as you can see, this is an activity that should be carried out more, but people don't. Because they don't have incentive. Why should I do flu shot? Why should I go get the see doctor? Why should I get my education? So, but if the government subsidize it, people who normally would not have got the education would. People normally would not go see doctor would, because government subsidize it. So you push it towards this socially optimal level, which is more. So this is a case of what we call underproduction. Because you don't have incentive to do more. And that is why government subsidizing education today, subsidizing healthcare today. You see the big application here in economics with a lot of things that you deal with in society. So, so again, this XB is, did everybody write this down? This is your subsidy, okay? So again, you know, the great economic application is such that in both cases that you see the graph here, that we could measure that vertical distance, what we call external cost and external benefit, in terms of the tax. So for example, if you want to say, okay, speeding ticket, what should we do? So you could draw a diagram like that. And we say, oh yeah, in economics, you could actually use graph. If you know this number and this number here, we could actually say this distance here, the external cost is exactly 1,000. Let's go back to the other one. Coming back to wrap up all these things together. See earlier, this is 2,300, this is 1,300, so the distance here is 1,000. If you like, I'll put 2,300. So in other words, now with the diagram, you could actually say exactly how much tax you should impose to correct the externality problem. Again, everybody, you should pay attention that tax is to correct the negative externality. However, subsidy, the good one, well, let's just put it on the base for now, even though we got debt with loss also. But you see how it is? If government subsidizes, and then people will push a little bit more, so that we achieve the socially optimal level solution. So the application is pretty relevant in today's society. And if you just kind of like open your eyes and look around, you see everywhere. Yes, question?
Would it be a situation where like on both of the graphs, like like for the external costs, like you know how the PMC goes left, it'll be a situation where it go right?
No.
Never.
Mm-mm. This always go up and that always go up. So we do not mix the two together. You don't mix black and white together. You don't mix the good and the bad together. So since you mentioned that, sometime in economics we also hear the word here, good. And this is the bad. I've seen some textbook use that term before. So you don't do them together. So in this case, it's always up, and that's always up. So because if you do it down, right, you're doing the other direction. In this case, you're overproducing, you want to cut down. Okay, and because your social marginal cost is your private marginal cost plus external benefit. So graphically speaking, what you just say will not work. That makes sense, right? So over here, again, you raise the social marginal benefit because you try to correct it. Because every time you add to that extra external cost or external benefit, it is higher. Because you add on to the graph you have externally, and then this become higher. The other case also become higher because this is a dollar value. The vertical distance is $1,000 here. Now in the textbook, in this case, it did not give you any number, which is kind of like generally speaking. But let me point out one other thing that will help you. You see the distance between these two, right, 8,000 and 12,000, is typically the width of the dead weight loss. So that's very important because you might be asked to calculate. Can you calculate that? Yes. We're not going to get into it because that's not so important in this particular chapter. So you can do it because this is 1,000. And here, you know, that the difference is 4,000. 1,000 times 1,000, half of that would be that triangle. So likewise there. Okay, so next we want to look at a few examples that are very interesting. We want to look at 3 cases. We want to look at a case of 2 guys. Very interesting example. This case of negative externality. And we use the example to try to bring out a very important theory in economics. So this is a case of 2 guys, Abercrombie, and the other guy is Fitch. You heard about that famous textile company or t-shirt company, clothing retail store. So we use their name here. And Abercrombie is the bad guy, or at least this is how we think of it, right? Will the Abercrombie dump the toxin into the river? So let's look at the assumption. The assumptions are extremely important. We look at three cases. This is the first case, part one. We say Abercrombie's a company produces a toxic waste. Okay. If the waste is dumped into the river, Fitch, this is the so-called good guy, the downstream, the fisherman, cannot fish in the river. Well, he can, but he won't get any, hardly any catch. So now the question is, should Abercrombie install a filter? What is a filter, everybody? What does a filter do?
Clean the water.
Clean up the water. So, clean up the pollution, actually. How many percent clean up, we don't know, but some kind of clean up. We're not gonna get into that yet. So now just a big picture. And let's look at the two assumptions, very important assumption. The first assumption say that assuming there is no communication between Abercrombie and Fitch, see the three stars there, very important assumption. So in other words, they can't really fly helicopters and drop flyers or drop bottles and try to communicate with cell phone or internet, sending letters or things like that, or even, like I say, using helicopter if the river is very long to try to drop hints, or signals or whatever. So no communication, okay? First assumption. Second assumption say, extremely important. Assuming that there is no law, none whatsoever, that will require Abercrombie to install a filter. Wow. It would be penalized for dumping the toxins into the river. Do you think he has incentive? Probably not. We shall see. Right. So he could probably just pollute to his heart content. Let's look at the two cases here. This is part one. So again, this is not game theory, okay? We just present it like that so it's easier for you to see. So we got two gains here. This is gains to the first guy, Abercrombie, and gains to Fitch, and then we got two strategy. Well, I wouldn't use the word strategy. Two choices, two options. First option is install a filter. The other option is stay put. Don't do anything. Do not install a filter. So we give you the number. So we're not asking you to calculate anything. So like I say, thank goodness these numbers are usually given to you, and then you just ask to analyze the situation, like in game theory. Okay, and let's look at it now. So let me ask you this: how much does it cost Abercrombie to install the filter? First row.
$30.
$30, yes. You're thinking. Very good. Everybody got it? Because, if you don't have to install a filter, your gain is $130. But if you install a filter, it costs you $30 less. Because, so that's how much it costs. Okay, and then the way to do this situation is you add it up vertically. So like if you add without filter, the what we call economic surplus will be 130 plus 50. So this column you have 180. Got it? So what about over here? You have 200. Okay? So let's look at it. Abercrombie would operate without a filter because, like I say, hey, it costs him $30. There's no law that requires him to do it. So he has every incentive to not to install a filter, which is right here. And if you look at it, you say, oh, wait a minute, this is only 180. But let's look at Fitch. How much gain would he get by having filter installed?
$50.
Okay, $50. Everybody got it? So how do we know? We look at this right here. Without a filter, he only get $50. Less fish, less catch. And over here, he will get $100 a day. So the gain to Fitch is 50, but the cost to Abercrombie is 30. So let's look at it. So in this case, we already know the answer is Abercrombie will not install the filter. But we look at it, once again we say, ha ha ha. Why do we say ha ha ha? Because you look at it and say 180 on the right side, but this is 200. This is better than that, but He has no incentive. He doesn't care about that fisherman. That's his problem. Your problem, not mine. Because it cost me $30. Why should I? Because he's not thinking about altruistic, right? Benefiting other people. He say, yeah, I know. It will gain you $50 bet. Hey, it cost me $30. So he's not gonna do it. So it's right here. So here's a situation, and then we say that there's a loss in economic surplus of $20 here because $50 gain. So we're now looking at the whole society, which consists of only two people. The first person lost $30, the other person gained $50. So basically, we say there's a loss in economic surplus of the difference between the two, which is $20. So this is quite easy to understand, part one. Let's look at part two. Now, in part two, we're going to relax one of the assumptions. Guess which one? It's the one about communication. Let's say right now, both of them, this number is the same as part two, okay? Part one, excuse me. The only difference here now is that we relax the first assumption. That is, we say now, both parties, both guys can now communicate. And at no cost. And the law does not require Abercrombie to install filters. So the second assumption still holds, meaning that, yeah, there is still no law that requires you have to do that, but now they could talk to each other. In other words, they can send lawyers. They could do internet, they could do texting, and there is now communication. However, very important assumption, add to that, the fact that they could communicate with no cost. Free communication. So guess what happened now? And they could still achieve this socially efficient solution because now Fitch will go to Abercrombie, and I'm going to write the solution here because just by saying like that, you may not see it. Over the years, I feed back to the textbook and say it's good that we produce this diagram so students can understand a little bit better, but they never did. I'm having to do this additional thing for you, which is not a problem. Okay, so you got this, right? Gain to A, gain to F. This is with filter. This is no filter. Okay, 100, 130, 50, and 100. So now what's going to happen is now Fitch is going to go to Abercrombie and say, how about it? How about what? And Fitch is going to go to Abercrombie and say, I would like for you to install filter. Okay, and I'm going to give you, I'm going to offer you $40. So this is what happened. Coming to this guy and say, how about it if you would to install a filter? I'll give you $40. So now this guy will have 140 right here. Okay, what about this guy? This guy is $40 richer. That is Abercrombie. What about Fitch? It's now $40 poorer, which means this becomes 60. Okay, there's $40 transferred to this guy. And look at this, they're still better off in both cases because then you look at it, this guy will still gain $10 and this guy will also gain $10. And then if you add up the new number together, this is 200, this is 180. That's the solution. That is, if Fitch were to offer Abercrombie $40, these are filter, they both will have $10 better off. So as I've shown you, and then we say that Abercrombie now, wow, would choose now to install the filter. And if it is so, you look at the number, well not just, but the new set here, which is the same, 140 plus 60, you got 200. So 200 is greater than 180, so yeah. Socially optimal solution is achieved. How is this being achieved? By negotiation. Yeah, the other guy go to the other one and say, how about it? And so we say economic surplus increases by 20. So we correct the problem that was a problem before in part one. Now in part two, we corrected it just by relaxing the assumption. So what is so different about this case two is they could communicate with no cost. Because if you were to send a lawyer to another person to talk to them, it costs money. Communication costs money. So we're assuming that there's no cost, but they could talk to each other. So then that will bring us to this very famous theorem or theory. This is also in your book. If you want to look it up, let's look it up. The definition is there. Tell me a page number if you find it.
257.
257. Is that the smaller font size or the big one?
It's the same.
Oh, it's the same, yeah, keep saying that. Right. So you see the cost theory. What does it say? If at no cost people can negotiate the purchase and selling of the right to perform the activities that cause externality, they can always arrive at efficient solution to problem caused by externality. Let me explain it, what it says. Because everybody have the definition. You can look at it. So what this is saying is that if it is free for people to negotiate with one another, so the buying and selling of the right to do particular activity, and in this case is dumping the toxins into the river. And a key word is that second half here. This is the part you should highlight. They can always arrive at efficient solution to problems caused by externality. If they could talk to each other, if there's communication allowed at no cost or free, then they could always arrive at efficient solution to problem caused by externality. And this externality could be positive, it could be negative. Both. Okay, I'm going to go on to the part 3 now, because you can get this definition from this page I just showed you. Okay? I see that some of you are still copying. Okay, go ahead. We'll wait another second or two. But that's in your book also. Copying it now is one thing, but understanding it is another thing. You need to understand what that means. And hopefully I just explained. But let's look at more examples. Now let's look at part 3, okay? This is, but we're gonna step back and ask ourselves questions. So now we're gonna say, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this whole analysis. What is that something wrong? You know, I mean, you kind of have a nudge like, okay, we're doing this analysis, but there's something wrong. Something wrong means, well, the something wrong part comes from really the part that say, wait a minute, why? Well, why should Fed go to Abercrombie and give him money? Why should he be the one who negotiates? You know, after all, the other guy is in the wrong. So this is what some of us would say. But look at this. Let's read this. Why should Fitch pay Abercrombie to filter out the toxin that would not be there in the first place, if not because of your factory? And then we say by law. But see, the problem is the first two cases we say there's no law. By law, Abercrombie cannot done without Fitch approval. We know that, but we relax the assumption. But then we also say this last 2 points are very powerful. Makes you think. But preventing Abercrombie from emitting the toxin will harm him by $30. And then we ask that last question that's kind of like rhetoric. Why should Fitch necessarily have the right to harm A? Wow. Yeah, people don't think about it that way. You always think, yeah, that's the bad guy, but have you ever thought about it the other way? So, you know, and that's because the whole thing, we ask all these questions because there's no law. Why should we have law? To correct the wrong, the right and wrong, right? Basically. So can you imagine like just driving out I-95, everybody just kind of like crash, you know? The world will be in such a chaos. So we need some kind of law to say what is right, what is wrong, right? Okay, so now part 3. Now, part 3, we're going to relax that very important assumption that is, remember earlier, both cases we say there's no law. So now we say, yes, now there is a law. What does the law say? As you could predict, the law's gonna say, Abercrombie, you can't do that. If you ever want to dump toxin into the river, you have to ask the other guy for permission. Or you can make it a law, but in this case, it's like that. Assuming that the law say that Abercrombie may not dump the toxins without Fitch permission, and they can negotiate with no cost. Hey, that one is still good. So now we're relaxing all the first two assumptions in part one. So let's look at what happened now, and this number have changed, so let's redo this number quickly. So this number is different now. I want you to make sure that you see that. So this is still 100 and 100. And on this side, you have 150 and 70 now, okay? So, I'm gonna raise that as well. So now, of course, you know, in this case, I think you could predict what's the solution. Solution will be to install the filter, right? Because now there's a law, so you have to do it. But watch what happened. The table is turning around now. Instead of, well, okay, you can read along with me. So if you look at this side, right? If there's no filter, the gain to both parties or to the whole society will be, you add up these two together is 220, got it? And then 50 plus 70. And these two you add together, you get 200. So what this is saying is, okay, the economic surplus is higher on this side without the filter, but with the filter is actually lower. So then Fitch in this case will gain $30 with the filter, right? Everybody, 170. But the outcome is inefficient. In other words, you know, even though he gained $30, but if we choose with a filter, we only end up with 200. But in this case, we end up in 220, and actually the conclusion is this is better. The reason that this is better is now, the table is being turned around now. What happened now is Abercrombie, the bad guy, now go to Fitch and say, how about it? I'm gonna pay you $40. $40 for what? For not installing the filter. So he's gonna come to this guy and say, I'm gonna give you $40. So now I'm gonna be $40 poorer, which is 110. You're gonna be $40 richer, which is 110. So again, 110 and 100. Each one of them still have a gain of $10 each. So again, it's a win-win situation. So we see, so at the end, the solution is actually without the filter. And this is a socially optimal solution because 120 is, how do you do that? Greater than 200, right? So, you know, you may scratch your head at this point if you have been following me, and you might say, wait a minute, well, we're still not quite happy with the solution, but because, you know, in this case, it's without filter. So, but remember, they could negotiate with each other, they could go to each other. Even though there's a law that say you could, you should not dump the toxin, but then the efficient solution is actually not to install the filter. Wow, that's kind of like surprising. But think about that last line there, everybody. That failure to allow pollution will have caused even greater harm to A. What do we mean by that? Because right now, if they're doing this is a gain of $10 to each, right? But if you don't, okay, you just, that the harm to Abercrombie originally would be $50, and that's more. Okay, so all this happened because of next slide. Explains everything. Summarize everything. When negotiation is costless, means free. And we say this already, this is Coase theorem. The theorem we just look at, it's pronounced as Coase theorem. So efficient solution to externality can always be found, whether it's positive or negative. Remember that, always. The adjustment to the externality is usually done by the party with the lowest cost. What? Because remember in part 2, Fitch had to be the one who go to Abercrombie and say, how about it? But then in part 3, the table is turned around. Abercrombie, the bad guy, turns out to be the one who had to go to Fitch and say, how about it? I'm paying you $40. Would you go with this option? You say, yes, absolutely. So when negotiation is not costless, not free, you have to hire a lawyer to do all the negotiation for you. Laws may be used to correct for externality. So I think this whole thing is pointing out, all those 3 examples is pointing out that the beauty of having a law, you solve the problem. Law is used to correct the externality. The burden of the law can be placed on those who have the lowest cost. What does it mean by the lowest cost? The person who is the most convenient to make the adjustment. So in part 2, it was Fitch, but then in part 3, it was Abercrombie. So what this whole thing is saying is that, number 1, Coase theorem always works if you could freely communicate with one another without cost. Number 2, if all things fail, law can solve the problem. And you have looked at that earlier, that if it is negative externality, we use tax. If we use penalty, we use fine. But if it is positive, we use subsidy. Now, the next thing I want to ask you is a while ago, right? I think Camille, Mr. Parker, you're the one who said something about pollution. Mr. Parker, I'm pointing to you now. So a while ago, I think you were the one who say something about pollution. So remember, the degree of pollution is important. How much pollution should be gone if you want to get rid of it? Now, there's no way that pollution is going to be exactly 0. Now, let's just assume that this afternoon, tonight, you're going to have a date. And what you do is you're going to go home and your date's going to come to your apartment or your dormitory room. So what you're going to do is you're going to spend this afternoon cleaning up your dormitory room, that is. And so you do the vacuum, you do the dusting, everything. You spend about, say, all right, an hour, well, 2 hours doing it. So you thought it was pretty good. And then your roommate came in and find fault and say, how come this dust here? And flip your, under your bed. Look at all this junk, man. Open your closet, whoa, everything fall out, So your roommate is finding fault about how clean you clean the room. So you say, well, okay, just to satisfy you and my girlfriend who's coming tonight, I'm going to spend another hour cleaning. Okay, tidy up the closet and get rid of all the trash under the bed, dust it underneath and the windows and the TV and screen, everything. So you spend another 2 hours. And guess what? Even if you spend that additional hour, or that second hour, or that third hour, fourth or fifth hour, it's not going to make much difference. People are not going to notice it. Your marginal cost is going to go up, but the marginal benefit is not going to be much higher. So this is what it is saying, that the optimal amount of negative externality, in this case pollution, is not 0, but it's likely to be greater than 0. You heard about all these famous cases of oil spill, right, in the Alaska, Gulf of Mexico. They have to spend money hiring this machine, this big oil company out there, to clean up the pollution. And no matter how many months they spend cleaning, it's not going to be 0 pollution. You can get it down to maybe 10%, that's pretty good. Because the more time you spend, it's going to be more and more expensive. But the benefit, hey, nobody's going to see much difference if it is between, say, 10% to 0. So they're not going to clean it until it's 0, because it's not possible. Because you have to practice. Well, it is possible, but once again, economics, you know, you talk about, you have to use cost benefit principle. Getting rid of pollution has both benefit and cost. The best policy to try to get rid of pollution is make sure that we practice our cost benefit principle once again. That is, the cost of further reduction, cleaning up, that is, must be equal to benefit of further reduction. So the cleanup effort should be expended until the marginal benefit of doing so is equal to the marginal cost doing so. So you can spend 10 hours cleaning up, but you know, it's the same. Your marginal benefit is already hit 0, really. So I'm gonna skip this one because this is the same one that we talk about. And the same thing because I spent quite a bit of time earlier talking about that. So the next one is tragedy of the commons. Okay, let me see, what was the 37, that is 16. I could probably, go back here. So any questions about this at all? Anybody? Yes, question?
It's a really simple question, but
Yes,
what is
please.
the QSOC, what does that stand for? And then what is the QPVT?
Oh, that one? Let me go back and show you that very quickly. That means quantity at private level, okay? And the other one, social quantity, that's how much you produce it at socially optimal level. So please, I'm gonna let you go shortly, but please read out this chapter in advance. If you want to read ahead, we don't have much to cover, but next part of the chapter is even more interesting. And once again, on Thursday, I should have all your presentation scheduled firm up, because I was supposed to do that, but I'm getting ready for this big event tomorrow. So by Thursday, you should have all the schedule for your presentation, so you know what day you will be presenting for your paper. So once you get there, it's time to go to the writing center and start booking appointment, because then everything is going to get busy and from now to the rest of the semester. Okay, have a good day. I hope to see you tomorrow at the open house. It will be from 11:45 to 3:45 at the outlet. Zach, don't forget to come get this. And Mr. Parker, I think you wanted to talk to me. Yeah, the time that we have is like this, you see the time?
Yes,
So we have 3 time slots, one is from 11:45 to about 12:05. It's about 1 hour and 15 minutes.